All right. I am making my very first ever Wicked Edge tutorial video. This is mostly for a friend named Ron, and but I might as well post it on YouTube because that's the easiest way to get it to him. So I'll just kind of do it for whoever wants to watch it. I've been sharpening knives for a long time. My favorite tools are Spyderco Sharp Maker is how I keep things maintained, and then Wicked Edge is just a great tool for reprofiling, getting a knife how I want it. If you're into the how you say mirror edges, the Wicked Edge can obviously do that. I mean, basically it's a vise which gives you the same angle on every single sweep. So having a jig really makes it quite simple. I think this is the older vise from Wicked Edge. The new one that has the hinge in the top, Gen 3 or whatever it's called, it is definitely superior to this one. This can get tough, especially on a flat ground knife. Today we're going to sharpen this little Sebenza, or large Sebenza rather, and luckily on a compound or hollow ground knife like this, the Sebenza has this big flat on it, so that makes it pretty easy for this vise. If you have a flat ground knife that starts here and goes all the way to the cutting edge, then you're running opposite angle to this vise, which is shaped like a V. So the newer vise is superior. I probably should upgrade, but I almost only sharpen Chris Reeve knives at this point. So there have been times where I've struggled to get it in the vise how I want it. So I do have the little digital angle finder that can connect to your stones and things like that. I find that that's really not that helpful, because what I'm trying to do on, especially on an expensive knife, is match the facet of the cutting edge that the factory already put on it, because I don't really want to reshape this edge. And if you look at this belt ground edge from Chris Reeve, it's not perfectly symmetrical in facet height from here to here. There's a skinny spot right here in the belly. The other side of the knife is a little bit different. I think if you really start looking at the geometry of the cutting edge shape, you can get pretty critical. Honestly, Chris Reeve's edge is great. They do a little bit of a convex edge, and I'm pretty sure the purpose of the convex edge is that it's just a very strong edge, and certainly gets very sharp. Can be a little tricky to touch up on the Sharp Maker because it is rounded on the outside, but it is a very they do a very good job sharpening their knives just on a belt. I'm sure the same guy sharpens almost everything. I don't know a huge amount about their crew over there. So this knife belongs to my friend Ron Jensen. It is a Knife Art carbon fiber slab, large Sebenza 21. It looks to be pretty new. Has a cool little Will Jekyll lanyard dealio, and a aftermarket. I guess that might come with the. Oh yeah, that's part of the Will Jekyll deal. That's cool. Anyway, this is a great knife. We're gonna vise it up, see what's going on. So as far as vicing up a knife, I'm gonna look and make sure the video is running, because I hit record. Yes, I am 4 minutes and 42 seconds in, haven't started. So this is the instruction manual that came with the Wicked Edge. The cool thing about this manual is it has a little chart for just recording your angles and depths and etc. etc. You can watch their videos as far as how all that works, but just so for my use, I've done a lot of recording what I sharpen things at if I ever wanted to come back and strop them on the wicked edge, or even touch them up on the wicked edge. I remember what settings I use. So a large 21 I've always done at 20 degrees because that's closest to what CRK does. On my little indicator here, I set the tip at A5, and I use the top depth, which I'll show you what that is. So here's our depth unit. There's the top and there's the bottom. Just two spots depending on your blade shape. I'm going to stick this guy right in here for a measurement. And then as far as the protecting the blade's concerned, I tend to just use a little piece of, it's actually not masking tape, it's like a paper tape, but I find it to protect the blade quite well from my vise. And then the next thing I do is I rock it back and forth. Oops, my tape needs to move further down the blade. I'm going to start with another piece. And you can put the tape on your vise if you want, doesn't really matter. I tend to just tape the blade because squeezing on this causes trouble. So I'm rocking this back until I'm on both legs of this unit. And I'm going to set my blade tip right at A5, and the knife is pretty far back in the vise at this setting, and I understand that, but it always handles the tip geometry really nicely if I push it back a little bit. So as far as getting this thing straight in the vise, you can use your angle gauge and all that. That's probably smart. Because I am in woodworking, I have a pretty good eye, and I tend to eyeball it for plumb with my bench top. And I do a little bit of zinging my wrench across the room. I'm going to eyeball that straight. I want to tip it to the right just a little bit here, and then clamp that down. And really this not as advanced vise is really only grabbing the top of the spine. Now I'm fussing with it. On this older vise, the top screw, you can only tighten it so much, and then you come down here to torque it down. Alright, so the knife is in the vise nicely. I could lift the whole thing up with the knife. I have not scratched it or anything crazy like that. Then I'm going to check my arms here, make sure they're set at 20 degrees. It's not exactly 20 degrees. But what I care about most is that I match this current edge that's already on it for cutting edge height. So next tool, definitely a Sharpie. So I actually cut the tip of my Sharpie and run down both sides at the same time. And I'm going to put a nice Sharpie mark right on that cutting edge so that I can see exactly where my stones are removing metal. I'm going to come back and hit all of the Chris Reeve edge until it's nicely covered. So then what I want to do is see where my stones are touching the edge. So I never grab my rough stones. I'll usually do this with my 600 stones, the green ones here, just to see where the stones are touching. And first thing I'm going to do is take a soft swipe on the blade and take note of where the stones are touching my Sharpie mark. And I know from straight overhead you can't see this. So on the right side of the blade, I don't know if you can see, but I am I'm into the base of this cutting edge with the right stone. On the left side, I'm right in the center of it. But that being a factory edge, I'm looking at the geometrical shape of this cutting edge. And right now the right side is tipped a little further this way, just eyeballing it. Then this side is, I could recenter this edge on the knife. I think I'm really most concerned with what the edge looks like. If the edge is just off center, it really isn't going to make a big difference for cutting purposes. It's really about, I want to see this facet, especially on an expensive knife, I want to see this facet be the same shape and size as this size, and I'd like it to stay the same height all the way down the knife. So, I'm actually going to scoot this stone over to 21, and part of the reason is where it's touching the knife. Part of the reason is that the knife is still tipped just the tiniest bit left in my vise, and I want this Sharpie mark to disappear further up the blade, and that is better. So I'm moving this arm out, is tipping the stone just the tiniest bit further this way. It's not going to be a full degree because the knife is tipped to the left just a little bit in my stone. So let me get a little bit more Sharpie mark off, and then I'll tip this for you. I don't know if you can see that, but now I'm really in the center of that convex edge and moving towards the tip, just like I am on this side. So I'm going to feel good about that. I'm not going to grind the crap out of this with 100 grip anyway. So I'm going to start with 200, and all I'm doing here is reshaping that convex round on each side of the blade. So I'm going to really slowly at first start working this edge. And you know, on a lesser knife, I'm just going to shape the blade however I want. On an expensive knife, especially a knife that's not mine, I'm going to really try to match and make the edge look just right. So starting with 200, the only purpose of that is I really don't want to grind these really deep 100 scratches out of the blade. So if you know anything about sharpening, this first step is profiling. We're changing the geometric shape of that edge. And the rest of it's all removing scratches, which obviously as you go to finer and finer grits, it's going to make that edge sharper and sharper. And if you think of the cutting edge as, you know, microscopically, it's very jagged as those diamonds rip through that fine edge of the knife. When you do that with smaller and smaller and smaller grits, obviously the knife gets sharper, and those jagged spots get smaller and smaller. So what I'm doing here, and you'll notice I'm using a scrubbing motion instead of a drag out. I cannot remember what Wicked Edge recommends for a motion, but I never drag this way for two reasons. One is them making lateral scratches in the cutting surface as opposed to towards the edge. I think that's probably, I could go as far as saying that's incorrect. I don't want lateral scratches in this blade. I want all of my diamond cuts to come out the edge of the blade. And then the other thing is, if you're sweeping, and you'll find this on the Sharpmaker as well, if you're sweeping across the tip, you are really changing the shape of the tip, which I do not want to do in this situation. So I'm using my scrubbing motion here, and I'm still really watching the shape of this edge because I really want it to be uniform down both sides. I don't want to have a fat area in the front. So I haven't quite made it all the way through my Sharpie marks, even with this 200 grit. But I'm not trying to yet. I'm still watching what this angle is doing to the facet of the cutting edge. So I haven't quite got to the tip on this end. This side the Sharpie mark is removed all the way from the tip to here, and then the edge rolls away just from here to here at this point. So a little bit more scrubbing in the back here will bring me all the way to the edge. I think in the Wicked Edge video they talk a lot about forming a burr, which the point of that is a burr proves that you are not just hogging metal off the side of the knife, but that you're actually all the way to the edge. And agreed, you gotta have a burr in order to know that you have got there. So I actually don't so much watch or look for a burr or try to make a burr. They use I think a piece of tissue. A burr will grab those tissue fibers, and that helps you see it. Honestly, I'm looking at the dust of steel that's coming off the blade. I can see the stone cutting the edge, and when dust starts to roll up on that edge on every stroke, you can tell you've made it all the way to the edge. You don't have to create any sort of tall burr or anything like that, because I can be pretty confident that I'm there. So I'm looking at the edge shape on this side. It is just right. On the left side, I'm a little bit shallow here at the very tip. So I'm going to grind a little harder on the front left and just see if my vise setting is going to cause a problem. I really don't think it is, or I would have moved it already. You can see my Wicked Edge vise is bolted down to a piece of paper stone. It's some sort of weird countertop material. I've never used it before, even as a cabinet maker. Don't even know what this is. It's weird. It's like a big thick paper micarta. It's heavy. You really don't have to have a big weighted stand. It's nice to be able to just throw it up on your bench or your table. Clamping it down would work just fine too. Okay, I'm really happy with the ergonomic shape of my edge here. I'm going to lay it on its side so you can see it. I've got a nice even line all the way from the heel to the tip. I have made it all the way to the tip now. My Sharpie marker is all the way gone. And it's nice and even. And the other side looks almost the same. I'm a tiny bit shallow here. Less so than the factory Chris Reeve edge was. And when it comes down to, I've got one shallow spot in one little spot, everything else is even and straight. That really has more to do with the thickness of the steel and where the edge is on that hollow grind. So there's not a whole bunch I can do about that. I don't want to grind any more steel off this knife than the very minimum. And knowing that maybe the next sharpening would take it to a little better aesthetic right there. But I'm not going to mess with that. I don't like taking steel off of $500 knives. So I'm gonna put my 200s back on just for a second here. You'll note I've probably sharpened, I don't know how many knives I've sharpened. Probably a couple hundred on these stones, a lot. I'm still on my first set of stones that I bought with my Wicked Edge. the diamond's just not falling all the way off. They still work really good. So I, as soon as I started noticing that my stones were feeling different than they did in the first 29s, I started thinking, oh, I probably should get a backup set of stones. So I did. I have a backup set of 400, 600s, a backup set of these. I have a backup set of 800, 1000s. And I don't know if I'm ever going to open them. We'll see. No, they'll eventually wear out. I'm sharpening less and less knives as I am doing less experimenting with knife brands and such. I'm really a Chris Reeve fan. Okay, so I have created a burr on the left and created a burr on the right, and I can just keep taking it back and forth very easily now. I'm really confident that I have a flat, straight facet on both sides. The aesthetic of the thing is really just about right. I'm going to take a dry rag, and all I'm trying to do is get any 200 grit diamond to go away, because I don't want to drag two little chunks of 200 grit when I'm now trying to take scratches out. So right now, looking at the edge, the 200 scratches are quite deep, and I can see them very easily. So I'm going to get into 400 here. I'm using a pretty short stroke. The center of my stone here is less gritty than down here, and I take advantage of that a lot. Just like if you're using a piece of sandpaper, you may be using your main piece, and then you need to take a scratch out. You might get into a brand new corner of your sandpaper, or like right here, I'm careful around the tip. I don't want to roll around the tip, and so I take even shorter strokes at the tip, and that's just my personal style. I'm sure other people can take long sweeps all the way to the tip just fine. Obviously, a long sweep is going to do more for your taking more steel off than a short sweep. But again, with a $500 knife, I'm just a little extra careful with my hands. I'm right-handed. You'll find that your right hand is much more skilled than your left hand if you're right-handed. But your motion comes right along after you do it a bunch with your left hand. I try a lot harder with my left hand to be precise. Alright. And again, these diamond stones, S35VN is not difficult to sharpen. I believe that's a good part of the reason that Chris Reeve helped develop it. And their hardening, I believe, is 59 to 61 or something like that. These are not hard blades to cut into with diamonds. I think the hardest, most difficult knives I've sharpened have been like Chinese copies of Shiragorovs that are, they claim to be D2, and who knows what they're made out of, but they're hardened like crazy. And I assume that hardening has a lot to do with how tough a knife is to sharpen. And again, I'm not a metal expert, but I have a little bit of experience with this. I do believe D2 is more difficult to sharpen than some of these fancier stainlesses. So you'll find that it's much easier to get a lot done out in the main part of the blade. I spend a lot of time focusing at the tip, scratch-wise, trying to get the scratches out, because it just takes a little bit more effort out there, and you're not passing it on your way down and on your way back. It's obviously at one end of the knife. So I am looking at the scratches that I am making and taking away. When I get to obviously if you switch grits too early, you're gonna leave some scratches that the next grit just can't take out without spending huge amounts of time. So that's really the whole point of the multiple grits, is it takes less time. You just compare it to sandpaper. If you're sanding with 150 grit and then you go straight to 400, you're going to spend a huge amount of time on 400. Whereas if you go 150, 180, 220, 320, 400, it takes not very much time to get those scratches out and be at 400. So same principle here with diamonds. Okay, so looking at scratches, my facet is really nice. I am going to flip to 600 and keep going. And this is the part that is really boring, where you're just removing scratches for a long time. I can feel in this 600 stone that down towards the bottom of my stone has a lot more cut than the center. It's done a lot less work in its life. So I'm making these short scrubbing motions I'm making is with the grittier part of the stone, the part that's still probably factory 600 by now. And I can see that there's only a couple scratches on this right side that look like they could be from the 200 stones. All the scratches are getting finer and finer. Whoop. You can't hurt yourself. It's nice that these stones are housed in a plastic. If you come off and bump your edge, you're just bumping it on plastic, which is nice because I've come off the knife a few times. And yes, I have cut myself sharpening. One time I was vicing something up weird and ended up pulling on the lock bar and closing the knife on myself. That hurt. I think I was vicing it up with the blade pointed toward me, and there was a reason for that. May have been a chisel ground knife, and no, that couldn't have been it. Yeah, if it was chisel ground and you're right-handed, you're gonna want to use your right hand. I can't remember. But yeah, the biggest danger is that you get bored doing this and you end up coming off the top and coming back down and slicing your thumb up. The knife is already really sharp. That's one of the cool things about this vise. I don't have to stop and feel how sharp it is. I know that it's flipping really sharp. Because I can see the edge coming to a point. So it's sharp. It's gonna get way sharper. You know, this stopping here at 600 is one of my favorite wicked edges right now, and little toothier edge. I know everyone says toothier. What does that mean? It is a more aggressive cutting edge for you know, if you're using it for daily tasks, tape, and you know, I'm a woodworker. I do a lot of little chiseling things with my knife. It's a toothy edge. But I don't stop at 600. I'll wicked edge to 600, and then I'll strop it to get that final burr nice and smoothed out. That's real sharp. All right, we are done with 600. We're going to 800, and again, I'm going to remove any diamond dust from the previous grit and keep going here. I think I'm going at about 75% full speed. I tend to, after you've done it a bunch, I tend to be pretty fast at it. I think I can take a knife to a beautiful mirror in about 35 minutes. Or I could do that 600 toothy edge in about, I don't know, 10. I'm being a little bit more careful on this knife, being that it does not belong to me, as far as the shape goes. So I started quite slowly on this knife. Here's another motion I use a lot, is just a swirling scrub. For removing scratches, that works good. The problem is I can't really do it with my left hand. I'll probably hurt myself. So that up and down scrub works really good, but you got to keep moving. You can't stop and compromise your edge shape. Obviously, when you're out on the belly here, the stone is not touching everywhere. It's touching just in that one spot, which is why you see me spending way more time on the belly and the tip, because the stone's just not touching as much knife as it is in the back here. And I'm watching this dust build up right at where the stone meets the edge. Meaning that I'm still making it all the way to the edge every time I pass through here. And you're trying to obviously give equal attentions to both sides of the blade. Some people count their strokes. I have pretty good attention to time spent. Plus, I'm really spending a lot of time looking at the edge. What you can't see in my video here is I've got a LED halogen spotlight, kind of some gooseneck lamps that are shooting at this angle to both sides, and they're clamped to my windowsill here. I found that you know, a lot of light's nice, but if you have light shining on the side of the blade from both sides, you really don't have to try so hard to focus on what's going on. All right, switching to 1000 grit. Same game. Spending a lot of time out here on the tip, because now I'm going to really start to see the scratches disappear. And we're getting into, 1000 grit is getting into where it's going to start to shine up a little bit. Again, be real careful not to roll around the corner, because you'll end up with a canoe-shaped tip. And I want mine to come straight to a point off that facet, like it's a shot with a laser. I think there's probably a good use for a rolled around sharp point, but I don't know what it is. I found you can even roll that tip around using the strops, just a little bit, so I'm pretty careful with that. I can feel my the resistance in my stone starting to get heavier as the surface gets more and more surface tension from being flat, smooth. There's no air relief like there was with the grittier stones. The knife is not budged at all in the vise. Never had a knife budge in the vise, except for when I didn't have a good clamp on it in the first place and it budged right away. Alright, so now I have these ceramic stones, which are 1200, 1600. One really important thing about ceramic is, opening a drawer here, keeping them clean makes them work a lot better. I found like a white rubber eraser does a better job than anything else. I've tried the borax and all the things they recommend on the internet, but a white eraser just makes them work really good. Just get all of that steel out of the ceramic. I think when I first got my ceramic stones, I took a Smith's diamond stone. I don't know what grit this is. And I actually lapped my ceramics so that they touched the blade the whole time. I don't know that everybody does that. I don't know how important it was, but I did it. I think on the really fine stones, it made a bigger difference. I have these 1.4 micron and 0.6 micron stones, which we'll get to that in a second. So 1200 grit ceramic. These feel a lot different. Very smooth. Feel like I'm rubbing glass on glass. It's not a wonderful feeling, but now it's already mirrored just from that little work there. At the end of the 1000 grit, still a very I don't know how much of that you can see in the, but it's still a very dull scratched edge, and just that first hit with the 1200 will take it all the way to mirrored, and everything from there out is again more scratch removal. Which the Strops are really good at. And now that we're out of scratch making zone, your up and down motion to keep your microscopic teeth all facing down is really out the window. We're just trying to get scratches out here. As far as I'm concerned, at this point, we're really not making the knife much sharper. A little stropping obviously will bend that micro edge back and forth till it's really straight, and remove a little bit more metal and steel, just like polishing anything. But this knife is really sharp. It was really sharp at 600. A little bit too toothy to easily get started on paper, but that's another cool thing about a mirrored edge is it'll start a cut with just the tiniest bit of pressure. No resistance. And that polished edge will just split whatever you're cutting like lubricant. And people like to show off how sharp their knife is by cutting paper. So right now on this 1200, I feel like there's less scratches in the right side than there are on the left. But it's really the way my light is hitting my edge. The right side of this looks like a perfect mirror. The left side of this looks like a scratched piece of stainless steel. But I know that they're both close to the same amount of scratches at this point. Okay, now that we're in ceramic, now I'm going to start cleaning it a little better. So this little bottle is just full of isopropyl alcohol. And we're going to go to 1600. Once I get into stropping and these fine things, I use just a Kleenex tissue to clean. That way I don't have any previous grits in the Kleenex, because just one little tiny piece of diamond is going to just scratch the crap out of everything. So a fresh Kleenex between every grit will keep that from happening. And I'm pretty confident there isn't any large grit diamond chunks up in the knife area here. They've all fallen down or been wiped away. So now things are getting really shiny. I don't know if you can see that. There's still a lot of scratches, but they're getting smaller further apart and getting quite shiny. And I never, you could make a perfect mirror edge. I've done that twice, and really it was for a really expensive handmade knife that was going to be really for show. And the guy who wanted me to sharpen it really liked the look of my edge, and so it took a lot of polishing and stropping to get every tiny scratch out if you're going to shine light at it from every angle. And I think a blade that you're actually going to use, I just don't see the point in spending quite that much time to make it just perfect, because you get a day or two into cutting and you're going to get some little scratches in your mirror edge, and it's going to stay looking good, but it won't be perfect even after cutting the first thing. So I try not to go overboard because I don't have that kind of time in my life. Now looking at this edge, we're using 1600 ceramic here. It's starting to be quite gorgeous. There's a few scratches back in here on the left side I'm having trouble getting out, so I'm going to focus on them a little bit. Again, we're not grinding steel off the knife anymore. We're just basically getting a little black stain on the stones. So the more you grind with these, you're not causing any damage to the knife. Okay, so there's 1200, 1600. I have these, like I said, they're 1.4 micron and 0.6 micron. That's all well and good. I don't know that they're worth buying. They will shine this up even further, make it sharper, but they will not get all the scratches out because they're so fine they can't reach into the core of some of these scratches. So you can get I could get a nearly very nice mirror edge without ever using a strop, just by going down to 0.6 micron ceramic. But I'm not going to do that because it doesn't work very good. So back to, now we're going to get into stropping. The strops, the Wicked Edge strops, I use the Wicked Edge brand paste. You can see I have some cuts in my strops. A lot of the guys recommend that you now move your arms in 1 degree so that you're not at the exact same angle of the blade, because there's enough flex in the leather to make that up. I've never done that, and you can see I've paid for it. My dad's a leather worker, and so new strop leather is pretty easy to come by for me. So you can see what I just did to my 5 micron, just a little squirt of alcohol. And what that does is not much, but what it does is make it feel more resistant on the blade. So I prefer to have them just a tad wet with alcohol. So you notice I'm not starting with the heaviest diamond paste that there is, starting with 5 micron, and I'm going to go down from there. Part of that is because we've already got a lot of scratches out, and I think there's a 14 and a 10, and then a 5 and a 3.5, and then goes down from there. I usually start with 5 after going that far with the ceramic stones. So I'm trying to get all the way to the heel on every stroke, and in this case you are running past the tip. I try to have very little pressure as the strop passes the tip right here. I don't want to be rolling around that corner, you know, hundreds of times. So I'm really giving it a forward push motion, like a cross-country ski looking thing. And then obviously the danger is moving backwards at all is going to cut your strop. And I think most of my strop cuts have come from trying to protect the tip. And I'm pulling back just a little bit at the very end. So I'm getting better at not doing that. What I usually do is stropping instead of watching it, because it's a little bit more physical. Instead of watching myself strop, I usually count. And what I do is I just strop for a while with the heaviest grit until it starts to look really good, which we're getting close there. And then when I feel like we're getting really good, I start and I do 50 strokes a side per grit. So let's do that and start with the 5 micron here. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm only counting the left one. 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And you can speed up if you're confident or if you get good at it. And obviously the faster you go, the less time it takes. And again, all we're doing is polishing. If you think about a buffing wheel, we're speeding up a lot. And honestly, I would like to buff this knife, but it would polish the stone tumbled look of the blade too, and you have a shiny blade. So I'm not counting, if you're wondering. I can't count and talk at the same time because I'm not a nerd. So I'm looking at the scratches that are in this side. I can't see any scratches at all because of the angle of my lights. If I can make this one better without breaking my windowsill. Yeah, it's hard to see. So this is where I'm going to go back to alcohol and a fresh tissue, because I don't want any 5 micron paste on my 3s. I don't let them touch each other in storage either. I put 3 to 3 face to face and leave the 5s out when they're in their little box. Each of my strops have a little jewelry drawer, and I've just got this little case over here, so they stay separated all the time. You can buy those little acrylic jewelry boxes or makeup boxes, whatever they are, on Amazon. They're super cheap. Or you could put them in a tackle box or a drawer or your pocket. I don't really care what you do. So again, we're going for maybe 50 strokes a side here. But again, I'm not counting. 50 is a lot further away than it seems it should be when your arms start to get a little rubbery feeling. And again, we're on 3.5 micron. And I am stropping the handle of the knife now, which is bad. I'll stop doing that. Okay, so we're going to call that good for 3.5. We're going to go back in their drawer. And again, we're going to spray it down with alcohol, and we're going to go down to 1 micron. And as far as microns are concerned, That's pretty small. I don't have any idea what is legitimate and not legitimate with how accurate this paste really is. And my 1 micron strop is a little beat up. That'll come off. And early on, when you just spray a little alcohol on your strops, it wants to stick a lot. So I'm lifting my vise off the table here. So I'm going to count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 50. That's beautiful. And here's the 0.5 micron paste. Definitely don't set your strops down in all the diamond dust. That's bad for all the reasons we've been discussing. There's diamond dust everywhere. Not a good place for optics. Okay, I'm gonna give these just a spritz. And here is my final grit. And I think I'm going to go 100 strokes on this final grit and just give it my best, since it's I'm definitely not going to start over with any grit, even if there are a few little scratches. Again, I only have so much time in my life. So I just want to give it a nice polish here at the end. And we'll start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 40. And there's about 100 strokes. And the 0.5s go back in their drawer. Looking at the edge here, I'm gonna say you can always do more. I will suggest in this case I'm unwilling to do more, because that's a pretty freaking nice edge. There's a little storage here in my vise for your wrench, and then this little guy kind of hides under there, and then this goes in here, and then I have a little storage place next to my little desk here. And I caught my finger on the edge. That was sharp. I'm alright. You can see the vise was really grabbing there. Of course, we were vibrating the knife all around. Now I've got a clean rag. Make sure I don't have a lot of diamond dust. I'm going to clean this entire knife. I got a little bit of strop paste on this face of the handle here. Get pretty good at cleaning a really sharp knife. Alright, look at the camera here. This is not going to be helpful. I'm going to bring this way down. In fact, I'll hide my camera from the deal here. So, if I get this right in the light, you can see there are still some microscopic scratches. But they are really small. So with this, if I can get the camera to focus here. There we go. So definitely have a nice mirror edge. And you can see the ergonomics of that edge. Why do we keep saying ergonomics? The geometry of the edge is very nice. This is the side I was most concerned about, up towards the belly there. You can see there's just a tiny bit less distance between the start of the edge and the very edge than on this side. But it is very close. So anyway, that's my wicked edging. 56 minutes of wicked edging. I guess it takes about an hour when you're trying to make a video. So there you can see those micro scratches up near the tip there. Those are a lot smaller than they seem in this video, but they're it's a pretty nice edge. It's a very nice edge, and it's a very sharp edge. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Cheers.